Good day to you. My name is Rob van Hal, and in this video you will learn in the most complete and crystal clear way possible exactly what modes are and how to use them. It is pointed at someone who hasn't got a clue about modes. No questions left after this video, I promise. Now, modes are everywhere, and a lot of music wouldn't even exist if there were no modes. Now, all these songs use modes in one way or the other. Now, we'll first see what the word mode actually means and how the word relates to music. And after that, we'll analyze the major scale, because the major scale is the mother of the modes. A single mom, I'm afraid. Now, next we'll create our first mode, and soon after that, the other ones too. Then it's time to name the modes and see what emotion each mode evokes. And after this, we will see why we actually should use modes and compare them side by side. Now, we will also learn which typical chord is associated with each mode, so we can make music with it. And next, I'll show you how to improvise over modes. Last, we'll look at some examples that show the power of the modes. So, let's go for it. Now, before we go on to the dirty pictures, it's good to be aware of what you should know before watching this video. Because you might know nothing about modes, you should know other things. You should know what a sharp and a flat is. And you should know some intervals like the third, the fifth, the sixth, and so on. And also you should have an idea of how the C major scale looks like. And if you know some notes on the neck of the guitar, that would help too. And that's it really. That will be the initial starting point of this video. So, flats, sharp, major scale, possibly some intervals, and some notes on the neck of the guitar. Now, according to dictionaries, the word mode means a particular form or type of something. And that applies perfectly to modes in music, as we will quickly see. But I also like you to think of modes as a mood or emotion. And for this, I like you to think of yourself as a unique person. And then think of yourself being in work mode, or in creative mode, or in concentration mode, or survival mode, or super enthusiastic learning mode, like now. In all cases, you are still you as a unique person, a unique human being, but the mode you're in is a slightly different version of you. Another form, another mood, another emotion. And that is how you must see modes. So, there are modes of a particular scale. The scale is the same, but we make different forms of that scale to get a different mood and emotion. And these new forms we call modes. For instance, modes of the major scale, or modes of the harmonic minor scale, or modes of the melodic minor scale. So modes are always modes of something. When we talk about modes in music, we mean different forms of a particular scale. Modes of the major scale are just scales that are derived from that major scale. And these derived modes are strongly connected to the major scale, and we call those derived scales modes. To be specific, modes of the major scale, right? So, the questions that arise are, how do we derive modes? What is the purpose of deriving modes from a scale? And how does a mode look like? Now, all these questions will be answered in this crystal clear video. Now, probably you are, and actually you should be, familiar with the major scale that has a particular sound. Here it is shown relative to the tonic C, so C major. It has 7 notes, and there are 5 whole steps and 2 half steps. And we call these kinds of scales diatonic scales. For every scale in Western music goes that the sound depends on the location of the half steps within the scale's structure. It defines its unique sonic character. These half steps are placed between the 3rd and 4th note and the 7th note and the tonic of the major scale. Just see it as a formula or a recipe of whole and half steps. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Whole, whole, half, whole. This particular recipe tastes like a major scale. Changing one note destroys the formula and ruins the sound of the major scale. So, whether we play a C major scale, D major scale, or E major scale, all of them are created from exactly the same formula, the same recipe, the same structure. So they all sound the same, only relatively higher or lower. Now the flats and sharps are necessary to keep the formula of the whole and half steps intact. Watch my tutorial about keys and the circle of fifths if you're not familiar with the major keys. A link is in the description. The same goes for the minor scale. This minor scale has another particular structure. Whole, half, whole, half, whole, and whole step. Therefore the scale sounds different. Is this clear for you? Then we'll take the next step. Now to create our first mode, we'll take the C major scale to work with. The scale starts on the note C and ends on the note C, and is subjected to a particular whole half tone formula, as we have just seen. But the thing is that we don't need to start on the first note of the major scale. We can start on any note of the major scale and play, for instance, from the note D to the next note D, or from the note E to the next note E, and so on. Now we know that the location of the half steps within the scale is responsible for the sonic character of the scale. Now important to know is that each time we choose another starting point in the C major scale, the location of those two half steps, and with that the sound, will change. So we can start on the second note of the major scale and play the C major scale from the note D to the next note D, instead of from C to C, like this. So what happens when we do so, and more important, what's the point? First of all, we are still playing the notes of the C major scale. Nothing has changed here. But the half steps in this new scale have shifted to new locations. They are now located between the second and third note and the sixth and seventh note. And this changes the sound quite a bit. It has a minor third, so this new scale is suddenly a D minor scale. But if we compare it to the common D minor scale, then we'll see a difference. The minor 6 B flat in the common natural D minor scale is now a major 6 B. So the formula is different from that of the natural minor scale, from the D natural minor scale. And therefore it sounds different. Now the new scale sounds minor, but it has a major character in the upper notes because of that major 6th degree B. And this makes it sound minor, but also hopeful. And this becomes clear when we change the melody in the D minor scale by raising the 6th from B flat to B. Now this special characteristic note in the new scale we could call the modal trigger note, because it triggers a special sound of the mode and tells our ears that there's something going on. And the dogs are acting strange too. So we are playing the notes of the C major scale, but we have derived a brand new scale from those C major scale notes. A new minor type of scale that is different from the common natural minor scale. And here it comes. We have created our first mode of the major scale. A mode that starts on the second note of the major scale and is very different from the others. Now what we did for the second note of the major scale, we can do for all the notes of the major scale. So starting the C major scale on the third note E will have another outcome. Now again we'll use the notes of the C major scale, but the tonal center is now E. And by that, the formula changes once again. Now the half steps are located between the first and second note and the fifth and sixth note of the scale. There's a minor third, E to G, so it is a minor type of scale, but not quite the same as the common natural minor scale. And that is because the natural E minor scale has a major second degree F sharp. And this new scale has a minor second degree F. And that has a serious impact on the sound. Just listen to the difference. Now the new scale sounds darker because of that minor second degree, which is the modal trigger note. It gives the scale a Spanish and Oriental sound. So now we have created another scale that is derived from the major scale. In other words, we have created yet another mode, the third mode of the major scale, with a different and unique character and mood. So let's see what the result will be if we start the C major scale on other notes of the major scale. If we start on the fourth note F of the major scale, we'll play the scale from the note F to the next note F. The formula has changed again, because the half steps have shifted and are now located between the fourth and the fifth note and the seventh note and the tonic note. Now this new derived scale has a major third and therefore it is a major type of scale, but not exactly like the common F major scale that has a perfect fourth interval, and this new F major scale has an augmented fourth interval. So this changes the sound to a more happy and uplifting version of the major scale. Let's compare the two scales. If we start on the fifth note G of the C major scale, then we'll play the scale from the notes G to the next note G. The half steps shift to other locations between the third and the fourth note and the sixth and the seventh note. Again, this new derived scale has a major third, so it is a G major scale, but with a twist. The common G major scale has a major seventh F sharp, while this new scale has a minor seventh F, and this makes the scale sound darker. Starting on the sixth note of the major scale, we'll play the notes of the C major scale from the note A to the next note A. The location of the half steps are now between the second and third note and the fifth and sixth note. The new scale that is created is a minor type of scale because it has a minor third. Now when we compare this scale to the common natural minor scale, we'll see that it is exactly the same scale. And this means that the sixth mode of the major scale is in fact the natural minor scale. So the natural minor scale is actually a mode of the major scale. And that is something, right? Now if we start on the last note of the C major scale, then we play the scale from the note B to the next note B. By doing this, the half steps are shifted again and are now located between the first and second note and the fourth and fifth note. It has a minor third, so it is a minor type of scale, but again, when we compare this to the natural B minor scale, then we see two differences. The second degree is minor instead of major, and the fifth degree is diminished instead of perfect. Now, this results in a very strange sound. The scale starts on the seventh note of the major scale and is therefore the seventh mode of a major scale. And it is also the weirdest sounding mode that we can derive from a major scale. It is a peculiar mode. The 6 new modes from a diatonic major scale have unique names that have their origin in ancient Greece, but the modes themselves are not so much connected to that old Greek system. The modern modes of the major scale are more related to medieval and Gregorian modes that used 8 modes for a Gregorian chant. Now for now let's put all the modes of the C major scale in a table and I'll show you the names and character of each mode by playing a typical riff with a particular mode. Not for analyzing, but just to hear the emotion of each mode. Now the C major scale itself can be considered as a mode 2. It is the first mode and the name is Ionian mode. We also call this the parent scale because all the modes are children of this parent scale. The second mode is a true modal scale. And we call this mode the Dorian mode. And it is a minor scale with a major 6th degree. And that major 6th degree sets the scale apart from the natural minor scale and adds a bit of major to this minor scale. It is used in many styles, but especially in jazz, rock and film scores. The name of the third mode is Phrygian mode. In this case, the E Phrygian mode. It is a minor scale that is characterized by the minor 2nd degree that creates a dark and oriental vibe. The name of the fourth mode is Lydian mode. In this case, the F Lydian mode, that is a major scale and characterized by the sharp 4th degree or the augmented 4th degree. And this scale is the brightest of them all and sounds uplifting, happy, but can also sound dreamy. It is used frequently in film scores for sci-fi and adventure, but also in progressive rock. This is a popular scale. The name of the fifth mode is Mixolydian mode. In this case, the G Mixolydian mode, which is a major scale that is characterized by the minor 7th degree that sets it apart from the other major modes. The scale is a darker sounding major scale and is used in many styles, but in particular for jazz, blues and old school rock. Now the name of the sixth mode is Aeolian mode, but we have also seen that this mode is actually a common natural minor scale. Now, if there was a characteristic note, then it would be the minor 6th. The scale sounds very sad and is frequently used in rock and pop songs. Now, the name of the last mode, the 7th mode of the major scale, is called Locrian mode. And as we have seen, it sounds weird and can only be used over specific chords and not so much for the whole song. It is characterized by the minor 2nd degree in combination with the diminished 5th degree. That results in a disconnected sound. And what we also should notice is that the modal trigger note is always part of the half-step pair. And every major scale has a tritone interval, and in C major that would be the interval between the notes B and F. Now the modal trigger note is always part of that tritone interval, as you can see in the graphic. We can also order the modes from bright to dark. And this way of ordering is called the Dorian brightness quotient. Now Dorian is always in the middle, where Dorian is 0, and the other ones are either on the positive side or on the negative side. Now to compare the modes, we should use the same tonic for each mode to really hear the difference. So now we'll use the note C as a tonic for all the modes, and this is called parallel modes. Different modes with the same tonic. Now the first mode is C Ionian, and this is the major scale. The second mode is minor but hopeful and is the C Dorian scale. It is the second mode of B flat, and thus it has two flats, B flat and E flat. It is a minor scale with a major 6th degree. The third mode is the dark C Phrygian mode, and this is the third mode of A flat major. And so it has 4 flats, B flat, E flat, A flat and D flat. It's a minor scale with a minor 2nd degree. The fourth mode is the uplifting C Lydian mode, and is the fourth mode of G major. It has one sharpened note, the F sharp. It's a major scale with an augmented 4th degree. The fifth mode is the darker major sounding C Mixolydian mode. That is the fifth mode of F major, and it has one flat. It is a major scale with a minor 7th degree. The sixth mode is the C Ionian scale and is the sixth mode of E flat major. It has 3 flats, B flat, E flat and A flat. This scale is also known as the natural minor scale. And the weird 7th mode is the C Locrian scale, that is the 7th mode of D flat major, which has no less than 5 flattened notes. So, let's listen to these modes one by one in a row. Now you have a good idea how each mode differs from the other. So each new scale that is derived from the C major scale has its own specific sound. And there lies the purpose of these scales. The mood and emotional landscape these scales provide can be used to create a certain emotion in your song or in your composition. Now, film composers use modes all the time to evoke a feeling or emotion that fits the scene. Dorian for sad scenes where there is still a little bit of hope for better times. for dark and intense scenes like the prologue in Fellowship of the Ring. And Lydian for uplifting sci-fi scenes like used in E.T. Mixolydian for happy scenes with a dark undertone like the Indiana Jones movies. And Aeolian for intense sad scenes. And Locrian for a disconnected mood in disturbing scenes like in the horror movie Under the Skin. But also in modern music styles, modes are used. Now, besides writing whole pieces of music in a mode, modes are also used in jazz and fusion to play over a particular chord, and in that way changing the mood of the improvisation per chord. Now we can change the mood of a song completely, like in this Phrygian version of Happy Birthday. So, modes are an indispensable tool for composers, musicians and improvisers, and without knowing you have heard them in many songs. For instance, almost all songs of AC/DC and a lot of songs of the Rolling Stones are in the Mixolydian mode. And many old school rock songs are using the Dorian mode. Prog rock guitarists use the Lydian mode, like Pliny for instance. Now, working with modes is different than working with a major or a minor scale. These two scales are submitted to the world's most used theoretical concept, which is functional harmony, that belongs to the world of tonal harmony. A concept in which every chord has a specific harmonic function. Now, maybe you have heard of a tonic, a subdominant and a dominant. Now, these are strong embedded entities to create music dating back to the end of the 17th century. But modes are not subjected to functional harmony and are mostly used in floating and undefined chord sequences to paint moods and emotions. Now, I made a separate tutorial about writing modal music, so watch that after you have watched this video. When making music with modes, it's difficult to stay in a mode and not stray back to the tonality of the parent scale that we are all so used to. There are some things you could do to avoid slipping out of the mode into the parent major key. You could emphasize the first chord of the mode to establish a kind of tonal center around the main chord of the mode. Or use additional chords that contain the modal trigger note, which is the characteristic note for the mode, like the major sixth in Dorian or the augmented fourth in Lydian. Now be careful with chords and rhythms that lead the music back to the parent major scale. For instance, using a G dominant 7 chord in the 4th bar of a Dorian chord sequence could lead the music back to the parent C major scale. And you could use the first note of the mode as a drone note and play the chords that are in the mode over this drone. The drone will keep your ears in the tonality of the mode. I suggest you try this for all the modes. Now, which chord you can use is easy. We'll harmonize the C major scale and start with the first chord of the mode. On the other hand, if you play jazz and use modes to play over specific chords, then these tricks are not needed because you are using a mode for the length of only 1 or 2 bars at most. Harmonizing the modes lets us determine the tonic of each mode. That is most of the time a typical chord that is specific for that mode. Now, using such a chord already evokes that modal sound. For instance, the tonic of the Dorian mode is a minor 6 chord or minor 13 chord. The major 6th and 13th extension are the same notes. Such a chord contains the minor third that evokes the minor sound, and it contains the major 6th, which is the modal trigger note. This typical Dorian C minor 6 chord sounds like this. The minor Phrygian mode has that characteristic flattened second degree. A super typical Phrygian chord is a suspended minor 7 chord with a flat ninth. And that flat ninth is the same note as the flat 2, as that minor second degree. On a guitar, this chord really shines when the root is E, so E minor 7 sus4 flat 9 for the E Phrygian mode. The typical tonic of the Lydian mode is a major 7 sharp 11 chord. Because of that sharp 11 that is equal to the sharp 4 that is present in the Lydian scale and is characteristic for the Lydian mode. It sounds like this. The Mixolydian mode is the only scale with a major 3rd and minor 7th degree. It results in a characteristic dominant 7th chord for a tonic that is often extended to a dominant 9th chord. Now, and this makes it obvious that modes are not subjected to functional harmony, because that unstable dominant chord that functions as a tonic defies all functional harmony rules. The typical tonic for a Locrian mode is with no doubt the minor 7 flat 5 chord, and this chord catches the character of the scale perfectly. Unstable and very weird for a tonic, and undermining the functional harmony philosophy. So, weird, but very, very modal. Improvising over modes is much like improvising over major and minor progressions, but there is something you should know. If you want to quickly find the skill that you can use as a basis for your modal improvisation, then think of the major parent scale of that mode. So both scales contain the same notes. Therefore, you can call upon the C major scale patterns that you already know. In this way, you don't have to learn new patterns for each mode. Now, another example. What patterns can we use over A Dorian? Well, A Dorian is the second mode of the G major scale, so we can use the G major scale patterns over A Dorian. It's quite simple, right? Important is that while playing the parent major scale patterns that fits the mode, you have to be aware of what the tonal center of that mode is, which note, more than you would do in functional harmony. And be aware of the modal trigger note, which is a characteristic note of the mode, together with the major and minor third, depending on the mode. Something like this in G Mixolydian, where I use the C major scale pattern, but emphasize the G Mixolydian notes. The first note G, the major third B, the modal trigger note F, which is the minor seventh of the G Mixolydian scale. These things in mind will help you to establish a true modal sound in any mode. You can also use pentatonic scales superimposed over certain chords to evoke a modal sound, and a link to that tutorial is in the description. The first example is an A Dorian. I use the minor 6-9 chord that contains the major 6th F sharp to establish that Dorian sound. A Dorian is the second mode of G major, and therefore we can use G major scale patterns, while keeping an eye on the tonic A and the modal trigger note F sharp. For the improvisation, I used, besides the G major scale patterns, the D major triad arpeggio that contains the modal trigger note F sharp. next example is in the E Phrygian mode and alternates between the tonic E minor and the second chord in the scale F major, a typical chord combination for the Phrygian mode. The modal trigger note is F, and the parent scale patterns that you can use are C major scale patterns. The example in the E Lydian mode uses only a variation of the tonic chord, where the E major 7 sharp 11 contains the modal trigger note, the augmented 4th A sharp. The E Lydian scale is derived from the B major scale, so I use scale patterns of that B major scale, emphasizing the note E, major 3rd G sharp, and the modal trigger note A sharp. Now, what you should take away from this is that the context determines how a scale sounds. If the progression is in the clear C major key, then the notes of the C major scale will sound as C major. But when the progression is in a mode, for instance D Dorian, then the notes of the C major scale will sound Dorian. So it's all about the context. Now, this was the longest tutorial I have ever made, but it was necessary to really explain the concept of modes. Therefore, I hope it was all clear for you. If there are still questions, then don't hesitate to ask them in the comments, because someone or myself will give you an answer. Now, after watching and understanding this video, I'll suggest you watch this video about modes, about modal chord progressions and modal music in general. Now, links to more tutorials about using modes are in the description. And check my Patreon page for additional info. For now, thanks for watching and bye!